So welcome back to another episode, and I've been saying that now for 17 years on the show, because tomorrow is 17 years ago that I actually made the Happy Console Gamer Show here on YouTube. And I just want to talk about what that was like and talk about the last 17 years and how I got here. It's absolutely crazy. And I will ask you guys, when did you start watching the show? Were you there at the beginning? Were you there in 2010? Were you there in 2020? Are you here in 2025? Let me know down below. Welcome to your doom. Yeah, I saw that the date was coming and I'm like, I can't believe it. And it's an oddball number to talk about, 17, right? Hopefully in a few years I can make it to 20 years, knock on wood, I don't get hit by a bus or something within that time, because that's something that I could have never imagined 17 years ago when I humbly came in front of the camera and started this show.
Welcome to the first episode of the Happy Console Gamer. It's kind of cool. My first review is my favorite game of all time, and that game is Phantasy Star 1.
And maybe a lot of you are just tuning in and you're going back and looking at some of the older episodes and you're like, what's wrong with this guy? I know, I hear that once in a while. Yes, I was a big time smoker. I smoked cigarettes back then, and 17 years ago, I quit smoking as well, and I've never smoked again ever since. But in the beginnings of the show, I was a smoker, so I was very thin, I wore a bandana. It's kind of strangely kind of legendary in the show now. People always look back to the past kind of fondly. Even I do, on that version of John, who is completely not me now. I'm in a completely different place in my life. You know, I have a wife now, and I have a child. I'm in dad mode. That's where I'm at now. But it's interesting to look at the John then and to see his motivations to start the show.
This is the game that changed my life. The very first time I saw this, I knew I wanted to be a video gamer. I knew I wanted to play video games.
And what were my motivations to start the show? I was looking around and I was watching YouTube, this brand new thing back then. And I was watching a bunch of content creators. They weren't known as content creators. I even hate that term. I was watching a bunch of people that made videos. And I was watching them and I'm like, who's this angry video game nerd guy? And I watched a lot of his stuff and I was like, this guy's brilliant. I love it.
This game is certainly a very strange case indeed.
And it inspired me. I was already out of film school. I was doing some very different kinds of work. I was doing some map making, animating, a lot of different types of stuff. I went a very different career path, but I loved making films and I loved doing all that kinds of stuff. And I was like, wow, I have so many video games. I have such a history. And it's weird how it kind of dawns on you. You're like, I really want to talk about this stuff. I always did, but I never had a platform. It was just with my friends could I ever talk to, about video games and anime, all that stuff. And I'm like, wow, I wonder if I can come in front of a camera and start my own show. Now, I didn't want to do what the Angry Video Game Nerd was doing. I didn't want to do the angry shtick. I thought that was interesting. I thought it was comedy. I thought it was fun. But I didn't think it was for me. And so earnestly, I did something that had never been done at that time. And I've talked about it before. I built these shelves right here. And I just quit smoking. And I built these shelves. And I was putting all the games on here, like Earthbound and everything like that. And I thought, I'm going to talk, I was in my 30s. I was in my mid-30s at the time. I thought, I'm going to talk about video games from the past. People are going to laugh at me and think it's really, really embarrassing. That's what I thought, because nobody had ever talked in front of their video games like this. They had a shelf. Now, so many channels have that. But it was very strange to do in the beginning.
So another game that is pretty rare is Earthbound, the big box. I remember walking into the store when this first went on sale and there was like 60 of them.
And I gotta say, I always say it was very embarrassing. I was like so embarrassed. I'm like, oh man, people are gonna laugh me off the internet. It's like, I already didn't want to get in front of the camera. But all of a sudden I was thinking about all of that stress too. I'm like, oh my God, this is a disaster.
One thing that always pisses me off is, and wait, I'm supposed to be the happy console gamer. I'm not supposed to be all pissed off. But maybe it'd be more funny if I was at times.
And I gotta say, I didn't know what kind of show to do. I didn't know what I was going to do. Was I going to stand and talk? Was I going to sit and talk? What was I going to do? And I didn't know at first, and I did a lot of different combinations of things. And then we finally fell down to the desk here and got that kind of set up. And I just want to say, in my early days of starting the show, I really hated talking in front of the camera. I felt so nervous. I couldn't articulate. I couldn't say what I wanted to say. And over 17 years, I think I got a little better at it, but it was difficult at first. I felt the pressure of everybody watching, even though at the beginnings, it was like a few thousand people.
It's very hard to do.
And that's what's happened for me. It started off, I started getting thousands of views, right, to begin with. And the show kind of took off. And the show is a slow burn show, and I've always really appreciated that. It's always kind of gone up steadily, very slowly. It's never gone to like 500,000 or 1 million subscribers instantly. And I'm glad about that. And the reason why I'm glad about that, it would be overwhelming for me. And so I've grown as my audience has grown. And I like the spot that I'm in. It feels that the perfect spot. I think most of you who watch are very much like me. You're a hardcore audience, not of me, but of video games. And I think you get the show that I'm just a fan of video games talking to fans. I am not the Access Media. I'm not anything like that. Sometimes I get review codes early. That's pretty cool when that happens, but it's not all the time. And so I've really enjoyed the show having a slow burn over the years.
And so after that, we actually headed down at 3 o'clock to the Seattle Convention Center. Yeah, I gotta tell you, it was a surreal experience. Everybody was super nice.
And I gotta say, I was very thankful that my childhood friend Rob came on the show, and I felt he really helped me out in those beginning years because I was so nervous and he was so confident in front of the camera, and I wasn't. I was like, look at this guy, he's so good.
Like, you were guaranteed you were the best player in your class if you had one of these.
And then it was weird. He hadn't been on the show for a long, long time, and he came on, and we were doing the show together one time, and he's like, oh my God, he goes, you're so much more confident than me. And I was like, how's that possible?
We're gonna do an entire video on your place because it looks so cool now.
We'll do a good tour now that it's set up.
Because I was always the guy that wanted to be behind the camera. I always wanted, even when I did home movies back in the day, things like that, I was always behind the camera. I didn't want to be in front. And it was because of the love of video games, and I talked about this before, that made me get in front of the camera and talk, because I wanted to see all of these old games that I grew up with, the classics, remembered. And I wanted to talk about all those memories. And I want to say something here. It's quite amazing. Over 17 years, I've been able to tell all my stories, all of my childhood stories about video games, my friends, my family. I've been able to share all of that with you, and you've been able to share your stories with me in the comments, and I've always really appreciated that. Be nice to my mom. She's 70 years old. She was kind of nervous about coming on here and doing this. And I also, a really big thanks to somebody who's obviously the most important person in my life, and that is for Kim. And I want to say something, and I don't say it lightly, is that the show wouldn't be where it is at without Kim. And I'm talking about behind the scenes, encouragements, really encouraged me to do some episodes. I was like, I don't know if I want to, if I should do that episode. She's like, you do it. Yeah, that's a great one. Do it. And Kim also changed the entire direction of the show. For the first bunch of years of the show, I kind of thought of this show as kind of like a retro remembrance show. And I enjoyed that, but I realized at one time that the show wasn't really growing very fast because it was just kind of a retro remembering show of past events. And Kim's like, why do you think that is? I'm like, oh, because I just talked about old games in the past. And she's like, well, you're playing all the latest games. You spend like $1,000 every Christmas on all the latest games. Why don't you talk about yourself playing those games? And I'm like, well, there's so many other people that do it. Like, what do I have to add to it? And she's like, you should really talk about it. And so I started to do that. And then that changed the entire show. Oh, get out.
Don't do that, you jumped at me!
Don't do
You jumped at me!
Now, I could talk about the past, but I could also talk about modern stuff, which I was always playing because I've always been a fanatical fan of video games. Not like a little bit I was into this hobby. I've always been fanatical, just like I was fanatical about drawing and anime and movies. Those things are my lifeblood growing up. And so Kim changed the direction. All of a sudden I was like, wow, I can talk about the new stuff and the old stuff together. And I want to also talk to anybody who's starting a YouTube channel or has been doing it for maybe a month or 2 years, a couple of years. I have some advice for you, and I really, really want to say this to you right now, is if you are doing this for fame or money, quit while you're ahead. Don't do it for those reasons. You have to do it for the passion and the love of what you want to talk about. No matter what it is, if it's a cooking show, a rock climbing show, whatever it may be, it has to be about the love of that, because that's what will get you through the years. For me, in 17 years, I've had some ups and downs with the show, some high years, some low years, but I've never looked at those, and I've never held on to those aspects. I've always looked at, what am I talking about, and why do I want to talk about it? And I'm here 17 years later, and this is a gift for me. It's a real gift. I'm so excited to get in front of the camera every week. And I do 1 to 2 episodes a week. Definitely every Sunday, we definitely do an episode. I always have an episode up because it's a passion. And it has to be a passion before anything else.
There's a thing that you really can't lie to the camera about your own enthusiasm,
No.
you know? You can't be like, I really like Star Wars. It's a good movie about space people.
I'll tell you something.
know?
Everybody that does that, and every time they do that, they're dying a little bit inside.
If you want fame and money, maybe that might come to you. Some people get it right away, and some people have to work at it for a very long time. And for me, I've had to work at it for a very, very long time. But what makes me come back every single week is not notoriety, it's not money or anything like that. It's because I love this hobby so very much. And I'm lucky that you guys tune into me and watch me. Wherever it is, in your living room, in your basement, in your room, wherever it may be, I'm very thankful for you because I don't have a show without you. And I've always been very thankful for the audience, number one. And the one thing, when I'm out and about and I meet people at conventions, I never refer to them as fans of the show. They're viewers of the show. Maybe very long time ago, I was, fans of the show, because everybody's referred to everybody like that. And I stopped at one point, I was like, that's very pompous to do, and I'm not doing that. And the one thing I want to say is, I was just saying thank you to everybody who watches, and I want to thank everybody who I bumped into over the years. And for me and Kim, it's really gotten overwhelming, the amount of times we've gotten recognized over the years, especially in Vancouver here. Walking down the street, a car goes by, and some guy like yells out the window, "Hey, happy Console Gamer!" And we and Kim are like, what's going on? That's like amazing. Or we're on the SkyTrain or a bus, we get recognized. It happens all of the time now, and it's really, really something else, and really, really amazing, and very thankful for everybody who's ever come up to me. And if you ever see me, come up to me and say hi. It's like, I've never come across that I'm like, some hard to get along with person. I think I kind of shock people. I remember I was at a convention maybe about 6 months ago, and some guy came up to me randomly on the floor, and he's like, "Oh my God," he goes, "I came all the way here to see you." And I turned to him and I said, "Well, you know what?" I said, "I came all the way here to see you." And he's like, "What?" And I'm like, that's my personality.
Spoon. Yeah. I mean, wait, don't get that on tape. It's on tape. It's on tape.
Yeah, I've had such a great time, and I love being able to talk about video games or my hobbies or my families. But the one thing that there's a secret to this show, and it's kind of a really unusual one, and that is 17 years has passed. I've always talked about the passage of time. And that is the main message of the show. It is to appreciate every single moment you have, because it goes by very, very quick. You know, there was one time I was 21 years old, and that is 30 years ago now. I've done many episodes about when I turned 21, and I got back into anime and video games really intensely, and that's already 30 years ago. And 17 years ago, a guy with a bandana sat down and did the very first episode of this show, and here I am 17 years later. And it's really a weird position. Now I'm married and I have a child. That's exactly what I said in the very beginning. I'm in a very different place in my life. And that's also something I want to say, is that you do change in your life. When I look back at the show and how I have changed as a person, there was John there, who's the smoker at 17 years old, still coming out of his rebellious kind of like partying years. into John in his 30s, that kind of was settling down into a career. I met Kim. We were living together. We got engaged. We got married, and then like years later, we've had a child now. I'm in a very different place than I was when I first started the show, and I've really matured as a person. And from that kind of semi-mature guy of the past, and especially even the all-gen gamers John, who's a very different guy than I am even now. I was hanging out with a bunch of dudes doing that podcast, just being stupid and silly back then, and now my main focus is on Kim and my daughter, and it's really something so fulfilling that it's amazing. This is what's going to blow you away. Kim is 5 months pregnant.
Let's take a look at this.
A little bit going on here. We've got a little bit going on here.
Just a little. She's kicking away.
I know. It's really amazing that a lot of you have been there since the beginning and have seen my journey, but also I've seen your journeys as well. And we've all journeyed together. And that's the amazing thing. The show is about the passage of time. I always talk about, I can't believe it's 30 years ago that Earthbound came out, or I can't believe 25 years for this game, or 10 years for this game. It's amazing, and we all have that ailment, the passage of time, and we all go through it, and it all affects all of us, and then all of a sudden, snap, and it's completely, it's at the end of our lives, and it's all over. And I'm very, very appreciative of this time right now, and I'm very, very appreciative of all of you who are watching, and all of you who have watched from the very beginning, from 17 years ago. And knock on wood, I'm still here for another 17 years. That's pushing it, I know. Hopefully I can get to the 20-year anniversary of the show. What the hell is this?
Oh man, I just had that fourth ball replaced.
How is this possible? Yeah, it's been a pleasure for me, and a pleasure every week to connect with you guys and see you in the comments and talk to you all in real life. Absolutely. So guys, I want to thank you for the last 17 years of the Happy Console Gamer Show here on YouTube. So anyways guys, until next time.
Until next time.